We also have a free search and rescue service to the families of missing children. The purpose of the Klaas Kids Foundation search and rescue effort is to rescue living children or to recover the remains of deceased children. Because we may respond anywhere in the USA, we rarely deploy more than one person per event. We have some other organizations that we work with, and we work in concert, and sometimes we're able to send as many as 3 people to organize a search and rescue program. But I want to be very clear that we do this on our dime, that we are almost always working with law enforcement in these efforts, that we have to be invited in by either law enforcement or the family, and that we depend upon a volunteer staff to help us when we go there. Depending upon many factors, we may have anywhere from 10 to several hundred volunteers, so it's important that our guy knows what he's doing. Our search and rescue incident commander is Brad Dennis. He lives in Pensacola, Florida. He's a certified National Association of Search and Rescue trainer educator. He's the leader of the search. He's the keeper of the maps. The picture you see there is quite a famous case from just last year, a case of baby Shannon Dedrick, who was in some kind of an arrangement, was taken from the mother's house and hidden in a teak box in the bedroom of a lady named Susan Baker, who had been previously suspect for killing her own child in North Carolina some years earlier. This one occurred in Florida, and we were instrumental in helping bring that one to conclusion. Since 2005, the Klaas Kids Foundation has been working with Clarity Media Systems, which is a division of the Flying J truck stops. We've been petitioning the FCC to provide a network that, among other things, would empower and enable the long-haul trucking community to be aware of and responsive to the needs of kidnapped children. Our proposal would enable long-haul truckers to access and watch a broadcast package of local and basic premium television channels during their federally mandated rest stops. This is a service that they incidentally do not currently have. We have a population of a community of over 2 million individuals who can't access TV during the course of their normal day, and we think that that's terribly wrong. We believe that truckers watching Amber Alerts on local television during their mandated rest stop, along with a Flying J produced 24/7 Barker channel dedicated specifically to missing children, would be in a position to notify their peers on the highways, on and off ramps, at convenience stores and service stations that a child is missing. They simply pick up their CB radio and they can enlist this army in a matter of moments. And again, this is a huge, huge army. Now, the evidence is very clear and compelling. Given the tools and the opportunity, America's long-haul truckers will help to create a safer society. They deserve the same rights to TV access as death row inmates and convicted terrorists. And this is a great irony. The guy that killed my daughter sits in his cell and watches TV 23 hours a day. It's his right to do that. I think truckers should have that same right. I think the FCC needs to make a decision. This is not something that needs 6 years of study. They haven't made a decision, but they need to make one, and they need to make it now. Now, let's talk a little bit about the legislation that Klaas Kids has been involved in. Klaas Kids approaches legislation from the front and from the back end. Many of the early things we did were based upon the presumption that, number one, victims have no rights in our society. Certainly the word victim does not exist in the United States Constitution, that we have an offender-centric society that really plays to the needs of these guys, that allowed the guy that murdered my child to be back on the street again, yet again, at 38 years old, after a lifetime of convictions, after, as I said earlier, having been sentenced to more than 200 years during the course of his criminal history. But we promote front-end solutions now. We work with an organization to provide funding for at-risk youth, an organization called Fight Crime, Invest in Kids. They're absolutely amazing. They've got many state chapters, but they primarily run out of Washington, D.C. We believe that we need to protect children from the current generation of predators, so I'm all for locking them up and throwing away the key, believe me. But I think we also need to ensure that today's children don't become tomorrow's predators. One of the first big pieces of legislation that we became involved in was the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994. Syracuse University alumni Joe Biden was very involved in this particular piece of legislation. Among other things, it banned the manufacture of 19 military-style assault weapons. It expanded the federal death penalty to include terrorist activities. It provided new and stiffer penalties for violent and drug trafficking gangbangers, authorized adult prosecution of certain juvenile offenders, a federal three-strikes law, and it provided $10 billion in prison construction funding for states that enacted truth in sentencing policies. Truth in sentencing means that you have to, if you're a violent offender, you have to spend at least 85% of your time behind bars, unlike, again, the guy that murdered my child was able to do. And it also provided $6.1 billion in prevention funding for at-risk youth. The next piece of huge legislation that we really got involved in was the PROTECT Act of 2003. The things that we specifically worked on in that were the federal two-strikes law. You know, I don't know, in the circles I run in, I hear it all the time, particularly on my Facebook page, that if you commit a crime like this against a child, they should put you in prison for the rest of your life and throw away the key. Well, the problem with that is twofold, as I see it. Number one, there are false accusations from time to time. And number two, some people do learn from their mistakes. So what this does is it addresses both of those issues. Certainly you can be falsely accused once, twice, I'm not so sure about that. And if you have not learned from your first mistake and you realize that you're going to go away for a long period of time the second time, then you deserve to go away for the rest of your life. And this other thing that we worked on was the nationalization of the Amber Alert. I don't like the way that turned out particularly. I'm sorry. I think that the reason I don't like it is because certain children, like my daughter, like Elizabeth Smart, like Adam Walsh, like many of the kids we see in these high-profile cases wouldn't have qualified for Amber Alerts because you don't have any vehicle information. One of the things you need to be able to do to activate an Amber Alert is you need a description of the vehicle, and sometimes you even need a license plate for the vehicle. Well, you know what, that's great in a family-type situation, but most of these guys really don't advertise that kind of information as they're about ready to make a snatch. I've been kind of fighting this battle for a long time by myself, but, you know, it is what it is. The next slide, the Adam Walsh Act. And we've spoken about this, other people have spoken eloquently about this today. The Adam Walsh Act provisions include a searchable national registry for sex offenders on the Internet, penalties for offenders who fail to promptly register when relocating to another state. Prison terms were extended for crimes against children, human trafficking, and the downloading of child pornography. Yet nearly 4 years, and this question was asked in one of the seminars today, how many states are in compliance with the Adam Walsh Act? Nearly 4 years after this piece of legislation was signed by President Bush, New York and 46 other states have refused to follow through and implement the law, despite its potential political appeal and the threat of losing federal funding for noncompliance. Nationally, the states largely concentrate on their own efforts to deal with sex offenders and registration. They realize that the loss of federal funding for noncompliance is more than offset by the cost of full implementation. Water's so good. This is a great piece of legislation here, and this is one that was actually written by then Senator Biden in the Senate and Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz from Florida in the House of Representatives. And what it did is it authorized over $320 million over the next 5 years from 2008 to 2013 in desperately needed funding for law enforcement to investigate child exploitation. It mandated that child rescue be a top priority for law enforcement agencies receiving the funds, and it allocated funds for high-tech computer software that could track down Internet predators. One of the best things that this has funded is the ICAC program. ICAC task forces have proven to be among the most effective and successful law enforcement tools yet developed to fight the scourge of our online sexual exploitation. Software developed by an ICAC investigator named Flint Waters was able to identify, and this is mind-boggling, more than 624,000 computers in the United States that traded in child pornography, much of it showing sexual abuse of very young children. But prior to the funding becoming available, there was nothing that they could do. They knew who these guys were. They had them dead to rights, but they were unable, they didn't have the resources to really investigate, to arrest, to prosecute, and to imprison these individuals. That really is what this particular piece of legislation, or that particular piece of legislation, the PROTECT Act of 2008, was about, freeing up some of those funds.